After a brief return to Johto, it was time to tackle one of the craziest challenges you suggested, completing a game using only the move Metronome. For those unfamiliar with Pokemon, Metronome is a non-damaging normal type move introduced in Generation 1. In battle, its effect is very simple. The Pokemon using it performs a random move from a predefined list. What's interesting about this move is its randomness, which allows even cute, basic Pokemon to use ultimate moves, and that's priceless. This was actually showcased as a running gag in the anime, starting with Togepi, well before Generation 2 was released. Speaking of which, Togepi is the starter Pokemon I've chosen because it's the only Pokemon that naturally learns Metronome at a low level. To achieve this, I had to modify the game, as is often the case with challenges, so that Professor Oak would offer it to me. But before diving headfirst into the adventure, let's clarify the challenge rules to ensure a solid foundation. First rule, only Metronome may be used in battle, nothing else. Switching Pokemon is allowed. Given this, I will, of course, build a team of Pokemon that learn Metronome. Second rule, using items in battle is prohibited. Just to clarify, I'm referring to items from the bag. Held items like leftovers or berries add a strategic dimension to battles as they need to be prepared in advance. Thus, I find it relevant to keep them, especially since they were allowed in player versus player battles with the link cable. Finally, the HM slaves are allowed, provided they do not participate in battles and remain limited to their role of obstacle removers. Now that we're ready, the adventure can begin, for better or worse. This starts off poorly, as my controller's battery is dead right from the start, causing my character to head into the bushes for an indefinite period. Togepi has dreadful offensive stats, and the battle against Blue Squirtle goes quite badly since we lose, but it's a battle for experience, not a necessary win for the adventure. We still lose some money, but after this interlude, there's only one trainer blocking our way before Pewter City, and as usual, it's the scout at the end of the Viridian Forest. We continue on our path to see what Togepi is capable of. Right off the bat, things go poorly when the first poison sting from Weedle poisons our starter, which retaliates with Ice Wind, a move I mistakenly believed was super effective against bug types, but Ice type doesn't have that advantage. Once the poison is on our Pokemon, we face a real challenge, and Weedkey doesn't need to do anything more. Togepi tries to fend off with Sabotage, which existed in previous generations, but only had 20% power, leading to weak damage. Before using one of Porygon's moves to gain Steel type, the opposing bug type can no longer touch us, but it doesn't remove the status. However, the move that will really put us in trouble is Volt Tackle, a very powerful move in future generations, but in Gen 3, it's different. The user loses HP equal to half of what it would have inflicted on the opponent. Metronome was not very kind to us for this battle, which we logically lost, but that doesn't mean the challenge is over. We'll try our luck again. Our salvation comes a few battles later, not thanks to a fighting type move, which is ineffective against poison types, but because Lucky has the presence of mind to use the move Sky Attack, a flying type move with 140 power, and the future stab for the Pokemon, Ute the Weedle in a bad state, and Egg Bomb finishes it. The fight is won, and at this state of the adventure, a late game move can be powerful enough and hit the mark, allowing us to attempt our luck right away against Brock in Pewter City at level 7. Geodude is faster, and his move hits hard from the start, so naturally, as Lucky uses 2 passive moves in 3 turns, the gym leader defeats us, and we have to return to the Pokemon Center. Unless we have grass type or high level moves, facing Brock seems ambitious for gaining experience, considering there's money at stake. Back to the tall grass to train a bit, or rather a lot, as we won't challenge Brock again until level 15 to have a sufficient margin against the expert of the rock type. Even so, we have to keep our fingers crossed when our Togepi waves its finger to call on a move. It does manage to use Draco Dance, boosting its attack and speed, like a setup Garchomp. However, the first decisive move it produces is Dive. It's a special move, but enough to defeat Onyx due to its double weakness. Onyx is thus sent out. For now, everything is under control. After 3 turns, a new special move is used. Needle Arm, known mainly for being learned by Cacturne. I seem to see that every week, but Onyx falls in this first gym, earning us the first badge. Yay! Before heading to Mud Moon, we stop by the store to buy Pokeballs, since a Pokemon in this area will interest us. But first, we need to reach it. There are many trainers on the route, and our move is quite unstable, especially when Togepi decides to use Explosion without warning, sending us back to the Pokemon Center. Now that we're in the cave connecting Pewter City to Cerulean City, we need to keep an eye out for wild Pokemon, which are quite rare, but we know there are Clefairy here. Since Togepi can naturally learn Metronome, it could be useful as a backup in the team. Unfortunately, when we encounter one, we use up a good 15 Pokeballs without success. To increase the capture rate, I decide to attack the Clefairy, because at 100% HP, the probability is around 19%. However, we have to rely on Metronome, and unfortunately, Lucky chooses Roar, causing us to flee the battle empty-handed. Out of all the available moves, it had to be that one on the only Pokemon we will capture in this run. Alright, we'll try again for this Pokemon, which we capture on the first try next time. It was worth the earlier frustration. We rename it Winamax, hoping luck will be on our side from now on. However, we're horrified to find it doesn't have Metronome, and won't learn it until level 29, so we won't have a second Pokemon for a while, as we need to train it to level 30. In the meantime, I chose the Helix Fossil, hoping the Pokemon gods will be with us. Here we are in Cerulean City, home to Misty, and also the challenge of the Nugget Bridge, which seems the most manageable for now. Blue is the first trainer, and he approaches us with a Pidgey. We start with our random attack, which weakens electric type moves. Conveniently, the only Pokemon that can use such an attack is us. Next, Pidgey lowers our accuracy with Sand Attack, and honestly, I'm starting to dislike that move. Fun fact, we use Belly Drum afterward, the move that halves our HP, but significantly boosts our attack, so if we hit physically afterward, we're pretty much guaranteed to finish off the opponent's Pokemon, especially with Flail, whose power increases the lower our HP is. However, our reduced accuracy becomes an issue, and Pidgey might finish us off. We need to approach this differently with Blue, and by differently, I mean coming back with a better trained Togepi, so we have a better chance against his Pokemon. We start with Powder Snow, which is super effective against Pidgey. Unfortunately, Pidgey doesn't use Sand Attack, so we finish it off with Psychic. The next Pokemon is Rattata, and we drain its HP with Giga Drain before taking it out with Dragon Breath. I feel like I'm commenting on a league battle here. When Squirtle comes in, Lucky decides to take a break from offensive moves, which allows Squirtle to get back in the game, although we do cut its HP in half with Super Fang. This battle is lost not because we're weaker, but because O-Move have limited power points, which are only 10. So, when facing a trainer with 4 Pokemon, you need to be quick and hope for an offensive move each time. It's not possible at the end of this fight, so we'll need to reset due to lack of resources. And victory eludes us once again. Having tried this battle dozens of times, there aren't many solutions at this point in the adventure. Intense training is required, either in the tall grass or against Blue's Pidgey. With such an attack, when not facing an important trainer, it becomes tedious. Nevertheless, at level 33, a new attempt is promising. It starts with a Water Gun against Pidgey, which brings its HP into the orange range, but unfortunately, our second move is Spore, which puts the Pokemon to sleep and causes us to lose too many PP. If we finish the bird with Powder Snow, we need to maintain an average of 2.5 PP per Pokemon. Fortunately, our attack against Rattata is Ice Ball, which is similar to Rollout, but for Ice type, and the advantage of this move is not its increasing power, but that it only consumes 1 PP for 5 attacks. So Rattata is taken out in 2 hits, and Squirtle loses more than half of its HP. Since Ice Ball has only 90% accuracy, it can't finish the job, but we still have 6 PP left for 1 more Pokemon. Squirtle is knocked out by a Seismic Toss, and finally Abra comes in. Vital Throw 1-hit knock it out due to the boost from Sharpen, a move unique to Porygon that boosts its attack by 50%. Finally, a victory. It's been a long time being stuck in this otherwise pleasant city. Now we can move on to face the trainers on Nugget Bridge and head towards the Cape of Azure to train our Pokemon a bit. Togepi reaches a level of happiness sufficient to evolve into Togetic. Its stats are now improved and it gains the flying type. For the match against Misty, we make sure Winamax starts the battle, so we can later switch to Lucky to gain some experience. Against Staryu, where Lucky as Master Lady uses the ultimate move, Mega Kick, stab with 120 power, which one-shots the Star before a face-off with Starmie. Given our level, it's not too difficult to fight, and Hidden Power does the job before Lucky uses Stomp, allowing our team to win the match, and finally leave Cerulean City to challenge the trainers at the Vermilion Gym. But before that, Winamax levels up to 29 and finally learns Metronome, so he's ready for the challenge. Since we obtained a Moonstone in Met Moon, we use it immediately, as Clefable is a very good Pokemon, even becoming overused in the 8th generation. Now we just need to face Loton Surge. The puzzle in the trash cans is still tricky, so it's not uncommon to have to battle trainers who are between them. One of the improvements in the remakes is that you don't have to redo the puzzle once it's solved, and you've decided to heal at the Pokemon Center before the battle against the gym leader. Speaking of the gym leader, we start the battle with Winamax, and Surge uses Voltorb. This battle is quickly resolved, as Winamax uses Water Spout, the move of Wailord, which annihilates the Pokeball for now, and the battle is now in our favor. We manage to face Pikachu, which is healed by its trainer, but our tri-attack is quite powerful. It's stabbed after all, and only Raichu remains on the opposing team. Unfortunately, this is where the battle deteriorates, as the opponent's Pokemon uses Double Team, making it untouchable. Winamax is paralyzed and attacks very infrequently, and when he does, it's with passive moves. He's in a bad spot, so we call on Lucky. I mentioned that he gained the Flying type, and for this confrontation, it's a bad thing, because Electric type moves are super effective against him. He doesn't have time to perform an attack that could have annihilated Raichu, so we lose a fight that started so well, but it's only a setback. This time, Winamax has less luck. Even if he burns Voltorb, it only has 36 HP left to face Pikachu. Pikachu also starts his Double Team Dance, another move that's beginning to annoy me, but with a pound, we're now facing Raichu. Similarly, Raichu uses Double Team, but one of our attacks lands, so when Clefable passes the baton to Lucky, Raichu's HP is in the orange. Lucky just needs to deliver one final offensive, which he eventually manages with Nightshade. This allows us to count more than half a hand of badges. We'll slowly but surely head to Lavender Town, passing through the Dark Cave, which is a real hassle I wouldn't recommend to anyone. So, we're glad to finally arrive in Lavender Town, because, in the end, light is quite a nice concept. Arriving in Celadon City, we're ready to dismantle the Rocket Casino, which means facing Giovanni in his quarters, located in the lowest basement. When we confront him, he has an Onix, and we send out Winamax, which unfortunately performs a normal attack that is ineffective. Eventually, Metronome creates the same move as against Blue, Ice Ball, and this attack is perfect against Onix's very low special defense, causing it to return to its Pokeball and be replaced by Raidon, which also stands no chance. However, Clefable is already up against Kangaskhan, a Pokemon that can only be caught in Australia when Pokemon Go was launched. Zendit frightened Kangaskhan with Bite. The Ice Ball chain is broken, but Clefable will launch another one using Uproar, which is somewhat associated with Whismur. Unfortunately, it's not strong enough to take down Kangaskhan, which can finally dispose of our Pokemon. That's okay, we still have our starter, and it finishes the battle in the best way possible by using Pikachu's signature move, Volt Tackle. It's no coincidence that the Yellow Mouse has been dealing with Team Rocket for over 20 years now. Giovanni abandons the scene, and we're going to make his business profitable by buying chips to obtain a prize. Indeed, at the counter, he offers Clefairy for 500 chips, which is roughly equivalent to 10,000 Pokédollars, a great deal if you don't want to waste time in West Moon. We buy 2, which we rename Foucault and Felicia. We now have a small army, but only 2 Pokemon are usable before we face Erika, the city's gym leader. Winamax starts the battle with Pin Missile, but it deals relatively little damage in the end, and the Fairy-type Pokemon struggles to find an attack that can easily handle the opposing Victory Bell, eventually being knocked out. Lucky is called in for support, in 2 attacks, including its stab move Gust. It takes out the first Pokemon before facing the Tangela. From this point on, Metronome uses Rollout, and like Ice Ball, it's the perfect move for tough battles, until it misses against Vileplume, and things become complicated. Our Flying-type Pokemon even struggles to attack, but fortunately, it starts using Charm, which at first might seem like a Parasite move, especially with so few HP, but as it lowers the attack of the Poison and Grass-type Pokemon, Vileplume's Acid attack is significantly reduced, allowing us to take a hit. Togetic takes advantage of this, and without hesitation, uses Blizzard to finish the battle. Another gym leader defeated, not without difficulty, but our strong capabilities made the difference. It's time to return to the previous city area to help Mr. Fuji. As always, Blue awaits us with a little surprise, a battle. On the first turn, Winamax continues to deliver good attacks, starting with a Water Spout that one-shots the Pidgeotto and helps the team avoid sand attacks. The next Pokemon is Growlithe, and Clefable manages to put it to sleep before finishing it off with a Psychic move. Good, the plan of mashing the A button works here. Execute enters the field, and our first instinct is to use Sand Attack. I now despise myself. That's it. Execute puts us to sleep. It can deal a bit of damage, wake us up, and then the cleanup resumes. We boost our defense with Acid Armor, and then use a Silver Wind, which is Bug-type and thus super effective against the opposing Pokemon, but it doesn't knock it out. Clefable is out of PP, so it's time to call on Lucky. With Smelling Salts, Lucky reduces the egg's HP to the red zone, causing it to defeat itself with confusion, thanks to Winamax. Blue then sends out his Kadabra, which takes over the situation by hindering our Metronome attack. This could be a problem in a solo run, but here we can bring Winamax back in to avoid the hindrance. Lucky is operational again, and even uses Dragon Dance, which boosts its already deadly moves that would one-shot Kadabra. Now Lucky faces Wartortle, Takedown doesn't finish it off, and in case there's a problem, Lucky uses Sheer Cold, one of those notorious one-hit KO moves, which are banned in competitive play. In any case, it's a victory for our team, which will now train its 2 new recruits against Team Rocket's Grunts. The team retrieves the Pokeflute without any major issues, so we can head down to Fuchsia City to see how we fare against Koga. Thanks to him, we can surf to Cinnabar Island, which would open up several paths for us, a useful solution in case a trainer faces us with too much difficulty. We send out Felicia against the first Coughing to gain a bit of XP. She still doesn't have the move Metronome, unlike Foucault, who has already been given a Moonstone. Since Foucault's accuracy decreases due to the first Coughing's attack, Winamax takes over and takes about 20 HP from Coughing's Sludge. Thankfully, we're not Generation 6, so now it's time for Metronome. Unfortunately, the 4 moves Winamax uses are either ineffective or too weak to harm Coughing, and the latter poisons and then takes down our first Pokemon. At least Coughing has the decency to use neutral attacks against its opponent. Lucky enters the field, and since it takes 2 hits to knock out the Pokemon, its trainer makes the mistake of healing it. Winamax's sacrifice turns out to be in vain. When Muck arrives, Lucky is already down to 30 HP, and as it is poisoned, toxic Pokemon make short work of it. As you might have guessed, the battle is already lost. Only Foucault remains, who is far too underleveled to handle Koga's last 3 Pokemon, which don't hesitate to evade, and make 70% of our Pokemon's attacks completely ineffective. Given that we lose a PP with each move, and this will cause long-term problems in the battle, waving a white flag seems like the best solution. We knew we had to go through this. Unless a lucky break with attacks, we need to train our Pokemon much more seriously. But that's okay. There are trainers everywhere in this region, particularly in the east and at Saffron City, in the Rocket Hideout. Back at the gym, our Pokemon are clearly better prepared, and we start the battle with one of our new recruits, Felicia. However, her Metronomes are initially too inconsequential to damage Koga's first Pokemon until it uses a rarely seen move. In this game, Luster Purge. It's Latius's signature move with a power of 70 and of Pedikic type, so it's super effective against Coughing, knocking it out in 1 hit. With 1 attack, our Pokemon makes up for lost ground by facing Muck. Unfortunately, against this Pokemon, it's the same old routine. The longer the battle goes on, the more it increases its evasion, and it's Koga's strategy from way back, as he used the same pattern in Generation 1 and 2. His Pokemon evade while poisoning the opposing team, which gradually becomes unable to hit him. We then send out our best Pokemon Lucky, so that the few successful attacks can deal enough damage and eliminate the poison Pokemon. After some mixed moves, Water Pulse takes down Muck, and in the next turn, a combo of Claws finishes off the Pokemon. We were a bit lucky. It's our second critical hit in this battle, and each time it's lethal to the opponent. Now comes another Coughing. We know we can defeat it if we have the right move. Eventually it falls, and it's Hyper Beam, which is stabbed on our Pokemon, that completely eliminates Wheezing under evolution, which we receive immediately afterward. Since Togetic was poisoned by Muck, it is knocked out, leaving it with very few HP against Koga's last Pokemon, which knocks it out. We'll have to rely on Winamax to secure the victory. For this, we rely on 2 moves. First, Hyper Voice, which returns and deals decent damage before Winamax uses Hydro Cannon. When this powerful attack hits, the match is settled. To be honest, it took forever to beat Koga, who was much less troublesome in Generation 1. Unfortunately, our struggles are not over. Right after come the toughest battles of this version against the best trainer in the game, with a relatively balanced team featuring some of the best Pokemon of his generation. As you might guess, it's Blue, Professor Oak's grandson, who awaits us at Silph Co, in the room just before the top floor where Giovanni is. We'll need a bit of Arceus's luck to not stay too long in this place where Team Rocket has taken over. Plus the first Pidgeot starts with Feather Dance, so ideally, the attacks should be special. When Felicia uses Metronome to at least deal some damage to Pidgeot, our wish is granted with Outrage, which is also a repetitive move, meaning it will use only 1 PP for 2 or 3 hits. It's a quite interesting move for this challenge. Unfortunately, it's not enough, and after some more attempts with Metronome, Pidgeot takes down Felicia, even though she managed to make the flying Pokemon fall in love with her ability. Returning to the game, it makes 2 normal starting moves, which are enough to take out Blue's first Pokemon. Good, now it's time for Growlithe to face our Pokemon. The battle takes a turn I don't like from this point on, as Winamax makes a multitude of moves, none of which are really useful in this fight, except for Sharpen, which increases the attack lost due to the opponent's Intimidate. However, when it only has 1 PP left, it uses the Miltank move, Milk Drink, which could have been useful, but now leaves our Pokemon unable to act, just a weighty life partner who can no longer deal blows. Fuko takes over, and with an attack of the same type as the opposing dog, Heat Wave, knocks out Arcanine. Execute enters the field, and I don't know what's happening in the battle against the rival, but this Pokemon is once again defeated with a bug move, which are quite rare when supposed to face it, so it's one-shotted. Good, quick progress is welcome. When Alakazam enters, it is greeted by a Swift, which works in our favor, as it seems that only 1 move can now finish it off, provided it lands. The next 2 moves we use, Meteor Mash and Wish, are from Clefable's moveset, which it could have used in this situation. They are quite useful since, sooner or later, our Pokemon will regain health. While Alakazam is finished off with a physical move, now it's Blastoise's turn, and Foucault might have regrets. Its first move is Fire type and burns the opponent. Ultimately, Psybeam does very little damage, before Foucault's PP are also reduced to 0. We have Lucky left, our best Pokemon, and it doesn't need to attack to take down our opponents, just switch to another Pokemon so the burn can take its effect. Mission accomplished. Blue acknowledges his defeat and lets us pass to Giovanni, whom we reach after a tactical nap involving more teleporters to recover our 40 PP for Metronome. Oddly enough, against the first Pokemon, Nidorino, our lead, Felicia uses almost all of her attacks, despite them being super effective. She becomes completely useless for this fight, so we have to make a hard switch to Winamax, who get poisoned by Nidoqueen. This misfortune turns into a blessing when, on the next turn, the Moon Pokemon uses Facade, which doubles the attack's power and allows it to one-shot the opposing Pokemon. Kangaskhan enters the battlefield, and Winamax has a timer on him. Despite this, he manages to first use Steel Wing, then regain some HP with Giga Drain, and finally a repeated attack that keeps him alive until Crunch, allowing our pink Pokemon to win its duel by a narrow margin. He can then be knocked out upon the arrival of Rhydon. As always, at the end of the battle, we call on Lucky since it's our best Pokemon, and it can clean up the remnants of Giovanni with a final special attack that takes down the 8th gym leader. Bingo, another trainer with 4 Pokemon, is defeated before we head to the Saffron City gym, where I finally identified a route that takes us directly to the champion without getting lost in the teleporters. The idea is to always move laterally, avoiding trainers until you reach the top left of the building, then simply go to the lower teleporter and you'll be facing the champion. She starts the battle with Kadabra, who doesn't appreciate physical attacks, even less so when there's stab, and Felicia gives us 2 of them right away. This allows her to have a duel against Mr. Mime, which she handles quite well since she recovers all her HP after a few turns. She even uses Lugia's signature move, which almost finishes off the Pokemon, but Mr. Mime holds on with red HP and is then healed by his trainer. No problem, it's just a matter of time, and a few turns later, Mega Kick, a normal type attack, takes down her second opponent. When Venomoth enters the field, we are out of PP, so it's time to call on Foucault to make an impact. Apparently, he decided to strike only when he uses Ho-Oh's signature move, Sacred Fire, which is super effective against the Bug-type Pokemon. It's time to face Alakazam. The latter can finish off our wall before Lucky forces the Psychic-type Pokemon to use only Future Sight, thanks to Encore, and this is enough to paralyze the Pokemon, who is now vulnerable to a Blast Burn that will defeat it. We have 6 badges now. The last gym was easier, certainly due to the great moves we had the chance to use, and now we need to set sail to reach Cinnabar Island. As always, I map out the mansion, and more broadly, the city of Cinnabar, which I might not have done in this run, and you'll understand why later. In any case, after answering a quiz, we face Blaine and his flamboyant team. He starts the battle with Growlithe, as usual, and on the second turn, Felicia uses Conversion 2, changing her type to water, which is quite useful in this fight, before using several attacks on the dog, which gets healed, but unfortunately falls in love with our Pokemon, preventing it from attacking. Felicia takes advantage of this by knocking out Blaine's first Pokemon at the cost of almost all her PP. No matter, we have 3 other Pokemon that can do the job. Foucault enters the field to face Ponyta. It is quickly paralyzed, but still quite powerful, and against Ponyta, who is also in love, when attacks land, they hurt the Pokemon. Astonish, and after a few turns, Spark finishes off the little pony, leaving its evolution to handle the rest of the fight. Rapidash enters the field, and despite the Psychic attack doing a lot of damage, its Fire Blast goes off twice 3 times, and the HP of our Pokemon is almost depleted. Back to the bag to call Winamax. We haven't said our last word. By the way, Winamax finishes off Rapidash with Flamethrower. It's a fire attack duel before a one-on-one battle with Arcanine, which also responds with fire. To douse Blaine's hopes, Winamax summons Muddy Water, which is a slightly weaker version of Surf, and this ends the fight. That's 7 badges in the bag, and this sacred number opens the doors to the Viridian City Gym, which we will conquer without delay. We find Giovanni for an ultimate duel, or at least that's what we hope when we start the battle with our team. Rhyden enters the field, facing Felicia, Felicia, who makes an excellent initial attack with superpower, making fighting-type moves super effective, followed by Leaf Blade. Well done by her. Giovanni's first Pokemon can already return to its Pokeball. Nidoqueen comes in for revenge, and Earthquake hurts quite a bit. In fact, it one-shots Felicia, who could only retaliate with a Crab Hammer. We send Foucault into battle, and he misses his first attack, but on his second try, Metal Claw is a physical attack, so he gets hit by the opponent's poison moves, making him vulnerable to Nidoqueen's attacks, and on the next turn, he is knocked out. This time, we send out a Pokemon immune to ground-type moves, Lucky, and with a few hand movements, it finds the attack that will finish off Nidoqueen. Only 3 Pokemon left, including a level 50 Rhydon, enter the field. Since we're paralyzed, it's not guaranteed that we will succeed with our offensive attacks, and Giovanni takes advantage of this, as his most powerful Pokemon knocks out our starter. We have only a Clefable left, Winamax, who doesn't seem interested in attacking until the 5th turn, when he launches a series of Ice Ball, unfortunately cut short by the opponent's speed. This battle was a failure. Some of our Pokemon didn't perform at all, so we're set to try again, hopefully with a bit more success this time. This quickly proves to be the case, as Felicia's first attack will be Bullet Seed, which one-shots Rhydon, and Nidoqueen is already back with her Earthquakes, which can deal a lot of damage to our Pokemon. Since it doesn't perform any interesting attacks, Nidoqueen still has almost full HP when Lucky enters the field. Again, Lucky gets poisoned, which doesn't help in defeating Nidoqueen's evolution. Lucky is knocked out, but manages to put the opponent's Pokemon to sleep. Winamax is called in, and guess what? He has his work cut out for him, as he takes down the male Nido with 2 attacks before sending a Surf at Nidoqueen, which to our delight takes it down in 1 hit. Giovanni realizes that victory is slipping away from him this time, so he calls Dugtrio, who will hammer us with Earthquake. After several useless attacks, we manage to neutralize his stab moves, and when we finally use an offensive move, Headbutt finishes off the 3 moles, who are ultimately quite fragile. The Mud Slaps have decreased our accuracy, and with only 1 Pokemon left, we'll try not to waste it. So, Foucault goes in, giving it his all to deal with the last Rhydon. With 2 offensive attacks, first Icy Wind, and then Psycho Boost, Clefable takes down Giovanni's ground and rock Pokemon, and just like that, we have earned the 8th badge. A new feat from our team, which is boldly taking its chances and has made good use of special offensive attacks here. So we only have to head to the Pokemon League, where Blue awaits us for another confrontation. It starts when he sends out Pidgeot, the first Pokemon he captured, and on our side, Felicia first shows off Silver Wind a bit too early before launching a Blast Burn, which is somewhat like the Fire-type Hyper Beam in this version, typically learnable only by starters. Unfortunately, it's not enough, and Pidgeot manages to take down our first Pokemon with relative ease. Next is Foucault, and while he makes the bird fall in love with us, thanks to his ability, he doesn't use many useful moves, leading him to lose a lot of PP and HP, in addition to missing a staggering number of attacks due to the sand thrown in his eyes at the start of the battle. So he's replaced by Lucky, who hopefully can deal with Rhyhorn, since Sandstorm will have finally dealt with Pidgeot. The Rock-type Pokemon then receives the move Doom Desire, which I didn't know about before, and which is actually another signature move of Jirachi. However, it's still a bit of a stretch as an attack, maybe because the previous Pokemon had lost quite a bit of attack stats against Pidgeot, so Lucky finishes off Rhyhorn with a Powder Snow. Growlithe is sent out by Blue to avenge his partner, and Lucky decides to use moves that aren't very effective against the dog, first using a Fire move, then a Grass move, which our opponent resists. We still finish it off with a Tackle before facing Exeggcute, against whom our hidden power is super effective. It's the only dreadful one we have before it paralyzes us and starts bombarding us with Solar Beam. We do get lucky with a series of rollouts, which land 4 times in a row despite the paralysis. That's notable, and the 6th evolution of our Coconuts is thus put out of action. Blue then calls out Alakazam, which is only good for receiving an attack, the 5th state of rollout, and this completely annihilates it. Well done, Togetic. Unfortunately, our starter now has only 1 PP left against Blastoise, which he wastes with False Swipe. It's now a dead end, and it's time to sacrifice Foucault, who is also unusable, so that, on the next turn, Winamax can safely enter the field. Here we go, 10 PP to defeat a Pokemon. It should work, and although Winamax is quite passive at the start of the duel, he does launch a Overheat, which would normally be a good move, but this is a Blastoise in the rain, so our special attack is effectively halved, which is somewhat unnecessary. It doesn't matter, we will do a double switch to recover that attack power, and Winamax can come back quickly into the battle to continue spinning its finger in the air to reduce Blastoise HP. Gradually, his HP drops to orange, but unfortunately, a final Water Gun takes down our Pokemon, who surprisingly lost the duel, even though it was a one-on-one. It's quite frustrating to lose on the first try at this point in the battle, but oh well, we can't do anything else, so we concede, hoping that luck will be on our side. Next time, on a new attempt, Pidgeot, as usual, lowers our attack, but Felicia still manages to paralyze it and put its HP into the orange zone. This is an interesting first step, as it is one of the most annoying Pokemon to face at this stage of the adventure. Winamax enters the field to use what will be Dive, and with just 1 PP, he takes down Blue's first Pokemon, and from there, Rhyhorn enters the battle, and it doesn't handle the Blaze Kick we're sending very well. We can tell Winamax has good attack stats, and with the next 2 offensive moves he uses, he slowly but surely gets rid of his opponent. It's Growlithe's turn to enter the field, and the dog isn't very threatening. It actually takes a Sacred Fire, which causes it to lose half of its HP, but after that, Winamax ceases to be useful, as he has no more PP, just after invocating the Hail. Enter Foucault now, who will try to get rid of Growlithe as quickly as possible, or so we hope, and after 3 turns, a Bite ends the dog's suffering, leaving room for Exeggcute. He also could have used a Dark-type move, but first Thunder and then Vine Whip are used, which do absolutely nothing to him, before Foucault Foucault uses Pursuit, which one-shots the egg basket, much to our delight. Alakazam enters the battle and immediately receives a Blizzard, which doesn't do that much damage, but does freeze it. Foucault has the freedom to hit it with an attack before switching back to Lucky, who still takes the Future Sight before finishing off the Mastermind after 2 tries. Blastoise enters the field, and Lucky first puts it to sleep before also sending an Overheat, like Clefable in the previous battle. It's useless, and even worse, Blastoise wakes up fairly quickly. The battle becomes awkward until Needle Arm hits, a Grass-type move, and especially a critical hit, which puts the opponent's HP into the red. Hang in there, only one more effort is needed, which will be Lucky's Jump Kick, the guarantee that we can reach the league after this battle. The rival is defeated, and he doesn't really congratulate us, and our paths part ways for a while. It's time to face the ultimate duel of this game, the Pokémon League. For this, we start with 4 Pokémon against Lorelei, the Ice-type Master, having thoughtfully bought supplies this time to heal between battles. The league member starts with Dugong, and we have Felicia, who begins directly with a Slack Off, a move that heals its HP when we're at maximum. Then, it's all passive moves. It starts off quite poorly, until Felicia uses Fly, which doesn't do much damage, so, a few turns later, Dugong finishes off our Pokémon, and it's already Winamax's turn to enter the battle. He will try the move Belly Drum, the famous move that halves the Pokémon's HP, but boosts its attack to the maximum. Ultimately, this pays off, as a few turns later, he uses Iron Tail, which is extremely boosted, to finish off the opposing Pokémon. Cloyster enters the field, and has pretty good defense, but again, Foucault uses Iron Tail, which is actually super effective, and another Pokémon returns to its Pokéball. Unfortunately, when Slowbro enters the field, Knockoff isn't yet physical, and since we don't have enough HP left, the Water and Psychic Pokemon can finish us off with Surf. Now it's time for Foucault, who will try to compete with this other pink Pokemon, but unfortunately, he's asleep. When he wakes up, he performs attacks with very low power, which is problematic since we only have 2 Pokemon left in the team. As a result, with a relatively useless Pokemon in front of him, Slowbro can finish off our companion and prepare for a duel with Lucky. The entry of Togekiss' pre-evolution doesn't go smoothly, as he misses in sheer cold right off the bat before being put to sleep by Yawn. When he wakes up, a Meteor Mash reappears, and now Slowbro's HP are in the red, which will draw Lorelei's attention, as she will heal her Pokemon. Everything needs to be done over again, and unfortunately, our Pokemon's HP is decreasing, making the mission seem increasingly difficult. Eventually, Slowbro starts using Ice Beam, which our Flying-type Pokemon hates, leading to it being knocked out. Our first test at the league hasn't been successful, and it's clear we'll need several things. First, our Pokemon aren't strong enough. It's important to note that the champion of this league, the 5th trainer, is 10 levels higher than the first member, which is a significant difference we probably won't overcome with this team. Another problem is the number of PP available for Metronome, which is only 40 here, and can't be healed between battles since oils and elixirs are limited in the game. So, we'll train at the league quite a lot, because once we are allowed inside, saving after using elixirs means we won't be able to go back. We'll only have one chance. With our starter at level 74, we can defeat Lorelei, but we know it won't be enough, so training continues. Note that Bisonfute has rejoined the team, as we've caught a new Pokemon to regain 10 more PP, and a small mistake in this run, there's a character who can teach Metronome to a good number of Pokemon that we haven't utilized. It's a pity, as it could have allowed Alakazam, for example, to have this move, but no. The 6th Pokemon we'll choose will be another Clefable, named Cestlong, in honor of this part of the challenge, which is dragging on a bit too much, so we return to the first duel against Lorelei and her Dugong, a classic, which Felicia at level 73 will face. He begins a series of rollouts, which ends after the second attack due to a 10% chance of missing. Fortunately, a few turns later, a Needle Arm go through, and this super effective attack allows Felicia to win the duel. Unfortunately, when Cloyster enters, his HP is low, and despite our Pokemon's efforts, Foucault will replace him. In this duel, a first Waterfall brings Cloyster's HP into the red before Lorelei heals it, much to our dismay. The following Brick Break is welcome, but Foucault's PP start to deplete quickly, which is bad for the rest of the challenge. Eventually, 2 not very common moves end the duel, but with Slowbro entering, Foucault has no more PP, and we've already lost 2 Pokemon, just like Lorelei. Cestlong enters the field, welcome, and as Slowbro will be put to sleep by Yawn, we immediately call in Winamax. He performs the move that Pidgeot always uses on us, Feather Dance, before following up with Hidden Power, which almost takes Slowbro out, so a small attack, and since our Pokemon is asleep, we'll send in Bisonfute, who will be tasked with performing a Quick Bind to then face Loch Ness. This Pokemon, inspired by the Loch Ness monster, receives a Thunderbolt, which is good for us, but unfortunately, it manages to freeze our Pokemon, who is then knocked out. Lucky enters the field, and if his Fire-type attack doesn't finish off the Ice-type Water Pokemon, the Burn It Inflicted allows him to defeat it. Lorelei is then forced to call on her Jinx. We'll try to finish the fight as quickly as possible, even though we're wary of a possible Ice-type move, and Togetic, still discussing Metronome, finishes off Lorelei's last Pokemon with Slash. The first league battle is won, and we'll immediately proceed to Bruno with the Pokemon we have left, and especially the PP we have left, to see what's possible in this league. Since our lead is still Foucault, who has no more PP, we directly send in Winamax to take care of Onix when it decides to attack. This happens with Clamp, which is super effective, and costs only 3 PP before falling. Hitmonchan then enters the field, and once again, Winamax attacks with Spark. Only one offensive move remains to defeat Bruno's second Pokémon. Since we're up against Hitmonchan, Needle Arm is quite suitable for the job, and this attack finishes him off, allowing our Clefable to face his cousin, Hitmonlee. Immediately, he uses Mist Ball, Latios's signature move, which is Psychic type and deals with the Pokémon without much trouble. It's all good for us, even though on the next turn, Machamp enters and can revenge kill his partner. It doesn't matter, we still have Lucky, who is at a high level and can withstand fighting type moves. After several turns, he uses Eruption, whose power depends on his HP, which are currently quite high. Thus, Machamp is knocked out again, his special defense isn't his best stat, and Onix enters the field. Eventually, a fighting type move followed by a single attack will defeat the Rock Gyarados, which then bows out. Bruno is defeated, which is perfect. We haven't spent too many PP here, so we can heal our Pokémon for the next battle, and also manage our PP carefully, being careful not to waste our precious potions. We remember struggling against Koga, who also had poison type Pokémon, and again, like him, Agatha will use techniques to evade before poisoning us when she's untouchable. Unfortunately, this happens in the first duel against her level 54 Gengar, where Felicia can't do anything and loses his PP directly. Winamax is sent out, but he too only has one PP, which he wastes with an attack, Drill Peck, that fails to hit Gengar. The situation is worsening for our team, and when there are problems, we turn to Lucky to solve them. Despite the difficulty, he manages to fly, but his flying type attack misses again. This battle is a real disaster and seems already lost. Even if we manage to win, it would be counterproductive to accept it as a success, since we've lost a lot of PP in this duel. So we start again, hoping it goes better this time. To do this, we'll send Lucky in as the lead to tackle Gengar, who will inevitably try to use Double Team, and what luck. On the first turn, we use Luster Purge, which will one-shot it. We're starting to get used to this move, which I didn't know before. Golbat is the next Pokemon, and after a few stumbles, we manage to use Sheer Cold, one of those infamous one-hit KO moves, with about a 30% chance of success, and when it works, it kills the Pokemon outright. Good news, we'll then face Arbok, and Lucky seems to be the right one for the job. He has a bit of trouble against the snake, as he performs fairly weak attacks, and when he uses Pound, it crits the Cobra, allowing him to defeat 3 Pokemon on his own. Well, now he's out of PP, so he'll need to be recalled, and to safely bring in another Pokemon, Foucault will take his place, though he too has 0 PP. Gradually, our 2 Pokemon will take poison attacks from Gengar, and one of them should fall fairly quickly. The Sludge Bombs are dwindling, and a final one finishes Lucky off, who can now be replaced by Winamax. However, Winamax is unfortunately asleep as soon as he enters the field and is slower. Fortunately, when he wakes up, he'll use Ice Ball, one of the moves we find incredibly important, since it's 5 PP in 1. In fact, this will end the battle, as once he defeats Gengar, he will also take care of Spectrum, who won't get a chance to fight. Agatha is defeated, and we're going to give an elixir to Lucky, who is our strongest attacker in the team, before facing Lance. We'll be doing this with a fully capable attacking team. The first duel is against Gyarados, and we're going to hammer the A button with Lucky, so that he can perform some interesting moves. He does manage to boost himself with Swords Dance, which allows the next attack to put Gyarados' HP into the orange. Consequently, Togetic finishes off the Water Onix. To counter our flying Pokemon, Lance sends out Aerodactyl, as it has a Rock-type move. It's clear we won't get a second chance, so we cross our fingers for Metronome to be fatal, but unfortunately, we only end up making Aerodactyl lose its PP with Grudge. It doesn't matter, we still have Winamax, who will be more effective with another well-placed Aurora Beam that one-shots the opponent's Pokemon. Lance will then urgently send out his Dragonite, but since it has physical moves, it falls in love with Winamax, who starts wasting all his PP on the Dragon Pokemon. This situation doesn't suit Lance, so he heals his Dragon, and everything is back to square one. We're talking about one of the best Pokemon in the game, so due to this, Winamax loses its attacking power and has to leave Dragonite in the orange, paralyzed, for Felicia to soon deliver an offensive attack. After a while, the Dragon falls, making way for its pre-evolution, Dragonair. Our team sends out Foucault, who does nothing but rest, allowing the Dragon to take the advantage. Then, a Vital Throw followed by a Rock Blast allows our Pokemon to deal with Dragonair, so now only one remains to Lance, whom we quickly attack. Unfortunately, none of Foucault's subsequent Metronome moves have significant offensive value, and thus his PP also falls into the red. Our third best Pokemon can no longer attack. It's getting complicated for our team, so it's time to switch to Cheslong, who delivers a critical hit to Dragonair with a Waterfall. However, he messes up a bit, as he had only one good move left to finish the Dragon, and does not make use of it. As a result, Lance finishes off our Pokemon. That's too much. We've lost enough PP in this battle. Bicenfute comes onto the field and uses Metronome, which triggers Explosion. Our Pokemon is knocked out, but at least it finishes off Dragonair and secures the win against Lance. The case is limited. We don't have many healing items left to face Blue, but we can at least heal our Pokemon to hope for a result with the PP we have left. We know it will be tough, but we don't have much choice since we can't really go back, and the battle against Blue was truly hellish. Since he has 6 Pokemon, and we didn't even have 60 Metronome PP, we had to hope for a direct result against his initial Pokemon to have a chance against the rest of his team. I don't even count the number of resets, just this trainer took about 10% of the challenge time, so we face the champion with knives between our teeth, and he sends out Pidgeot. Our lead here is Lucky to deal as much damage as quickly as possible, but unfortunately, he only has 6 PP. In this battle, he wastes his first 2, and unfortunately, there's a stat decrease, which is Pidgeot's specialty, so we call in Winamax quite quickly, as he fortunately hasn't had any stat changes yet. After a while, he uses Skull Bash, which not only finishes off Pidgeot, but also raises his defense, which will be absolutely useless against Alakazam. I admit that, but since he uses Water Spout, he one-shots the psychic Pokemon, and thus faces Exegcutor. This one puts him asleep, another greater horror, but Winamax hasn't had his last word yet. He uses Toy Needle, an insect-type move move that arrives just in time. Every time we face this Pokemon, I feel like we have luck. He will thus take down 3 Pokemon before facing Raiden. He still has 3 Metronomes left, but he wastes them with Agility, then with Spite, and finally a Blaze Kick, which doesn't do enough damage to rock and ground Pokemon. Winamax is out of PP. He's now useless, but he did his job. Congratulations to him. We send in Chestlong to replace him, and he uses Bind, which he misses, complicating things, of course. Raiden can 2-shot him with Earthquake, so the PP we could have used are wasted. Fortunately, Bison Fute is sent in to avenge his partner, and since he uses a Water-type move, he completely finishes off the first Pokemon created in the game. Arcanine enters the battle, and his Flamethrower hurts, but we use Water Pulse for a first move. It's not bad at all. Before the legendary dog can finish us off, we end up with 3 Pokemon down. It doesn't matter. We still have Lucky, who enters the battle with some capabilities left. The main issue is that with the Flamethrower he receives, he gets burned, so his physical attacks are now halved. It doesn't matter. He's still effective here. He still manages to do Luster Purge, and since Blue heals his Pokemon, everything is back to square one. Even though we had a defense drop on the Psychic attack, it's really our luck. When we use Waterfall, which is special in this generation, we can finish off the Pokemon. Lucky has to give up against Blastoise, as he has no more PP, so we send in Foucault to take his place, hoping he can take some hits. Unfortunately, he too has no more PP, leaving only one Pokemon that can attack. It's Felicia, our only hope, who just has to win her duel against Blastoise, but unfortunately, she uses Scratch from the start. Come on, just 8 more attacks. On the next turn, Blastoise uses Hydro Pump, unfortunately, and our HP are already in the red. As he prepares a Skull Bash, we try to reduce Blastoise's offensive moves by switching to our Pokemon that are dead weight, as they can no longer attack, to give Felicia a chance. Once Foucault is down, Felicia returns, uses Metronome, and a Shadow Ball falls on Blastoise, but it's not enough. Blastoise manages to increase his defense with Skull Bash, and Felicia's Metronomes only allow her to perform boost moves. After missing a turn, Blastoise finishes us off in a frustrating battle. We were so close, we had started the fight so well, which is why I showed you, but it took just 1 Pokemon to fail, technically 2 with Kesslong, for us not to win the final victory. It doesn't matter, we will try again, hoping for a good start as well. As always, it's Togetic who will honor us by starting the hostilities, and as always, Pidgeot will frustrate us with feather dances that weaken our attacks. We spent an entire evening against this trainer, so I have to admit that now, all I do is hammer the A button, hoping that, purely by misunderstanding, it works. So quite quickly, Lucky runs out of PP, and Winamax has to replace him. Since he receives a Sand attack, we switch to Felicia, then back to Winamax until the Pidgeot decides to attack us, and all our stats are intact. He loses some HP, and Winamax returns. What you just saw is one of the usual struggles that our team has the luck to experience, where our 3 best Pokemon, in turn, are drained of their PP by the Pidgeot, and of course, after losing so many Pokemon, we reset, meaning the fight wasn't meant to be. Let's keep the faith. Will the next one be decisive? Cross your fingers and give a thumbs up to the video. It seems to help the channel's visibility. Pidgeot versus Togetic, Cannon Duel number 3. This time, Lucky goes straight for a Sky Uppercut, which puts Pidgeot in trouble, and Blue, being the sneaky little weasel he is, will heal his Pokemon. In the meantime, we had switched to our Clefable to have clean stats, and False Swipe does little damage. After a passive turn, a good buff occurs, and we'll finish off Pidgey quite quickly, which is all benefit for us, since we now face Alakazam. Right away, Winamax manages to put the Pokemon to sleep, and hits him with a Feint attack, which puts its HP into the red. Excellent start to the battle. Pin Missile will finish off Alakazam, and his Psychic colleague Executor will enter the field. Again, Winamax is very early in this battle, and uses an Ice Beam, which is enough to one-shot the Plant-type Pokemon. What a monstrous job from our first captured Pokemon, and it doesn't stop there. Raiden enters the field, and Winamax uses a special move, Feint Attack, which puts Raiden's HP into the orange before finishing him off with Bubble. He's now at his 4th Pokemon, having lost all his PP, but dear God, it feels good to start a fight like this. He will then give way to Lucky, our most powerful Pokemon, and unfortunately, none of his moves will be truly useful until he can use an Aeroblast, which is stabbed, to finish off the dog. It was his last PP, leaving only Blastoise, but we still have 3 Pokemon with PP left, including Felicia, who is level 73, and is sent in directly. She still takes an Hydro Pop right away, which hurts quite a bit, and her first Metronomes aren't very positive. A Sand attack can be thrown before her HP go into the red, so we decide to recall her to bring in another Pokemon more safely, and at the same time try to stall so that Blastoise uses up all his Hydro Pump and that the rain stops. After a while, we bring in Chestlong, and the results are mixed. His first 4 moves are passive until he unleashes a Leaf Blade coming out of nowhere, which brings Blastoise within range of a final hit. We'll sacrifice our last Pokemon so that Felicia can return to the field, and we just need to hope that Metronome is an offensive move. It's Psycho Boost, Deoxys' signature move, and of course it's very powerful. Blastoise is knocked out, and the battle is won. That's it. By extension, we finished the challenge using only Metronome, a victory that can be described as laborious, and of course quite lucky, but as in many situations in life, luck is something you create. I hope you enjoyed the challenge, which was actually a bit stretching, so we will not last longer. Thanks to everyone who supported me until the end. Don't hesitate to let a comment with your favorite move in the game, and see you very soon for new adventures. Au revoir.